Obviously, divorce can be very emotionally draining. What sort of challenges do you see women, people having, not just during, but also afterwards as well?
They tend to self-blame. They blame themselves for their so-called failure. And yes, Amanda said.
So is it more self-blaming rather than it was his fault? I'm just kind of...
Sometimes it's a bit of a balance, right? But a lot of times it's the women that come to me, they blame themselves, but also realize that, it's not their fault. But somatically, their body knows there's something off, right? And talking about the trauma bonds, that they've had with this person, because they've invested so much time with this person. And if we're talking about your nervous system and your chemicals in your brain, you're actually addicted to that person in a sense, even if that person is narcissistically abusive or emotionally abusive as well, right? And so what I've seen is that they have this fear, guilt, or shame that is going through their minds and their emotions of I'm not enough, or they fear that they don't have enough time to, especially for women in their 40s, to rebuild their life as well. So through the process, I help them to reconnect to themselves, rebuild their sense of self, and then move forward from building their future.
After divorce, is there anything legally that needs to be done, or does it kind of legally everything stops once the divorce has taken place?
Right. So once there's a court order in place, that should be fairly final. But what we see is, and potentially linked to what Sophie was just talking about, is that really the co-parenting relationship carries on.
Yeah.
So, this person, which, maybe there was a deeply hurtful breakdown, but you still have to communicate with this person all the time. About the children, about maintenance, right? So these are the two areas where there could be continuing disputes over the children and over maintenance. Lack of payment, blocking of access, just difficult access arrangements. Abuse can still continue even if parties are apart, and could have two separate homes. But there's all sorts of things that could still happen. Sometimes abuse could happen also through children.
Financially, let's say someone moved to Singapore, they were here on a dependent pass, they didn't really work during their time here, so didn't actually build up any of their own savings. If they were married to, say, a narcissistic person who did have control of everything, what can the party who was the dependent do in order to get some financial control? Is there any sort of rights in place for them?
So through the court process, there would be, what we call discovery, which is basically the disclosure of things like bank statements and expense lists and, receipts and all of those things. I think the issue a lot of times with such relationships is that the woman, you're talking about a female dependent, just has no idea what's happening for years. And only thing they might have in terms of knowledge is one joint account and a fixed sum coming in every month and potentially a supplementary card. And so that lack of visibility in a sense is a little bit problematic going into proceedings, not having any information. But there's certainly ways that we could support a client to say, let's this is what we could do to find out. Now, where a person comes to me and say, I've been together for 10 years or 8 years or whatever, but I haven't contributed financially towards the assets, then potentially they are weaker compared to if they were to divorce in a different country, like their home country, if they had the ability to file elsewhere.
I didn't realize that. I thought it would be
That's
similar.
why we did it here. So my ex-husband and I were both American. I'm still American. I think he is too. And we divorced in California because it was very, very easy.
Right. So California, for example, is a 50-50 state.
Yeah,
very
correct.
clear.
Very clear.
England is actually generally 50-50, although there are exceptions as well. But Singapore isn't automatically 50-50.
Okay, can we not discuss this because I don't want my husband to hear this?
Tune out now.
Sure.
So it's not 50-50. That's interesting.
It's not automatically 50. It could be
Okay.
for longer marriages or where both parties have contributed. a little bit financially.
That's, I had no idea. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. So then so for expats, it may be beneficial then to file for divorce in your home country.
If possible. So what we would do is, if an expat client came to see me, the first thing I would do is to check off, which jurisdiction can she file in?
Interesting.
Right, and I would look up all the jurisdictions, and then we set up a kind of a group meeting with all the lawyers and all the jurisdictions, and then we'd say, this is the jurisdiction, we're doing it.
Obviously, I'm just using this as an example.
Sure.
That the husband wants to file in Singapore because he's been the main earner. It's his finances. Yes. And she wants to file elsewhere. How do you resolve that issue?
Yeah, that happens all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That happens all the time. So usually, it looks like it's a bit of a race, right? Yeah. Which court is going to proceed first? And so if the husband has filed in Singapore, then usually what the wife would do is she would engage lawyers to try and stop the Singapore court proceedings, and he would try and stop the foreign court proceedings.
Wow. Yeah, this happened to a girlfriend of mine. If you're listening, I know you know. Yeah. He filed in Hong Kong because they briefly shared permanent residency there, but they were absolutely living in Singapore. So it was one of those things where they had this like brief history of Hong Kong, but then but the Singapore court would have been more favorable to her. He went hard and fast, exactly what you're saying, to try and get the proceedings sped up in Hong Kong, because technically they were PRs there. So yeah, there's definitely shady business that can be done, and luckily they had no kids because this would have come to a head. But yeah, it's the race against the courts, exactly what you said.
Is there anything that you think is pertinent for anyone considering divorce to know or think about that I haven't asked you guys? Is there anything that you think
divorce hacks?
Yeah.
Divorce hacks you should be aware of?
And so actually when a client first sees me and if I see that emotionally quite distraught, not the most stable or in a great place yet, actually the first thing to do would be to get emotional support for yourself. Because there's so much research on the brain and how really if your prefrontal cortex is just overwhelmed, right, you cannot think logically, you cannot make good decisions for yourself or your children, right? So emotionally you need to look after yourself, then kind of take second step. So I always think more information, more education is always good. Right, then you can take those steps like, okay, I need to start collecting my financial statements, I need to start listing out my expenses, etc. It's really important that when someone says, okay, I believe I'm a victim of abuse, to say, well, in addition to seeking help for themselves, to actually write down and document what that means. Because if someone came to me and said, I'm a victim of emotional abuse, like that's not going to mean anything for me to be able to provide them the advice, right? So they need to say, on this day, he like threw something at a wall, or at this day he yelled at me and called me names, and at this day, etc., etc. So that needs to be documented very, very well, and where there's objective evidence to have that recorded.
That's what I was going to ask. So there needs to be proof, or
ideally proof, if not witnesses. Our definition of abuse is very, very wide. That it now includes sexual, physical, and also psychological and emotional abuse. And it could be one instance, it could be a course of conduct, and there are many protective measures now in place in Singapore that could protect a victim or a survivor from abuse, such as like you could try and get an order to just say stay away from me, or no contact, no communication order. And really abuse is something that we see affecting all sorts of women and men. Right, it's not just a lot of times people think it must only affect the stay-at-home mother who has very little financial control, and yes, that's one part of it, but also it really does affect all sorts of women and men.
You'd be quite surprised actually what kind of women come through the door and seeking for support, because they could be high flyers. And they are strong, they're independent, they have it all, but behind doors you don't know what's going on. Not to judge yourself when you're going through this process as well. Be gentle with yourself if you are going through this. It's important to seek help and support. The trauma-informed perspective of abuse,